This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome into another edition of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. It's Bill Bartholomew here with you for new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, and of course, whenever breaking news happens, and now every Saturday at 3 p.m. on 99.7 FM and AM 630 WPRO for the Bartholomew Town Radio Hour. Today, we have a vast and varied roundtable of expertise to break down the latest round of recreational cannabis legalization legislation here in Rhode Island. So without much further ado, I want to get right into this one. It's kind of a longer episode, at least by B-Town standards, but I think it's worth it because we hear from cultivators, we hear from people on the testing side, we hear from people on the retail side. It's a lot of great input. And by the way, we're continuing to assess this bill through a variety of different voices. So there's obviously a big equity piece to this that is certainly not lost on me or I think anybody on this roundtable either. It's something that we certainly will be presenting throughout the course of the coming weeks as well, and expecting to have the sponsors of this legislation on in the coming weeks, in addition to what you're going to hear today. So let's get right to it, shall we? Let's have our panel introduce themselves and talk about Rhode Island's latest round of recreational cannabis legislation here on B-Town.
Matt Belair, I'm the post-production manager for JDE Industries, Sweet Spot Farms.
I'm Peter Kasabian from Loud. Loud is a state-licensed medical marijuana cultivator located in Warwick, Rhode Island.
I'm Henry Ricciardi. I'm from Hank's Herbs. We are also a licensed cultivator here in Rhode Island.
Jonathan Martin. I'm a practicing internist and one of the co-founders of Pure Vita Labs.
And Jason Inicelli, also a physician, one of the co-founders of Pure Vita Labs.
Stuart Proctor, a co-founder with Jason and Jonathan, and I'm currently the lab director here at the facility.
All right. So the big question right now, there was testimony last night at the State House. This is going to go on for a bit longer. It's not as if, we're going to have legal cannabis next week or something like that, obviously. But as it stands right now, initial impressions of the legislation and initial impressions of the path forward to getting this passed.
Sure. I can start. Honestly, I think that from a structural standpoint, we had talked about for quite a while the possibility of shifting the sort of balance of power here and how this thing gets rolled out and the establishment of a Cannabis Control Commission. I do think that the commission, as it stands in the bill, looks like it's assembled, and I like the fact that we have the advisory board in place that would sort of be a source of information for the commission to kind of balance out the perspectives of the industry as we start to deal with sort of important issues as they arise. And they will arise. I mean, we've looked at other states go through this with a regulatory process where the initial set of regulations that are put out don't fit the bill properly and they need to be revised. So, as long as we are conscious of that sort of balance of power and in honoring the perspectives of everyone involved in the industry, I think that we have the makings of a system that could work very well for a recreational rollout.
Anyone else?
Cultivators? I agree with what you said. With the balance of power, it's important. It's important to have the advisory group advising the new commission. And it'll be great to have representation from cultivators, retailers on that board, and also social equity participants as well to get a broad range of representation on that panel.
I also would like to add that, I'm very happy, and I think everybody in this industry should be happy as where this bill is right now. For the most part, it's a very good bill. There's always going to be a few tweaks here and there that will not be to each individual's liking, but we're really close, and it's a very, very good bill.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just my thought. I mean, I think it covers everything from not just how the actual control commission is structured. It's also the way there could be feedback from laboratories, cultivators, dispensaries. Everyone would have some input. I mean, the current regs, they were rolled out for the medical marijuana, they were great, but of course, when they were put together, it was put together from a point of view without having everyone's perspective, and there were obviously a lot of roadblocks. That's the roadblocks wrong word. There were bumps in the road that could have been ironed out and made a smoother process all round had this sort of input been present at the formulation of the bill. And I think that is actually taking place with this bill as it's been put together.
Yeah. So everybody seems pretty happy with having this bill out there. We're all excited to move this industry forward, but I think there have definitely been some criticisms that we've heard around. And some of that revolves around even just the basic structure of it. So although I think there's a lot of great detail in this bill and everything that we've always been worried about as far as the safety and the testing of cannabis products out there, the structure of it is interesting, right? There's 3 people at the top of this new regulatory body that are really in control of what appears to be 100% of the rules and regulations that get promulgated and move forward. Beneath those 3 people is an advisory board of, I believe, 18. 19. And yep. I believe 10 are voting members, 9 are just advisory members. And, with that number of people, I think you get a lot of perspective and you can have some great discussions. You can make your subcommittees. You can get some details on, the questions that are going to come up about how they approach certain things that arise in the industry. But what do you guys think about having the 3 person Cannabis Control Commission at the top of this structure?
I mean, I can comment. I think that, look, the number of individuals on the commission, I'm not, again, we want more than 1. We want more than 2. I mean, 3, I would say, is sort of the bare minimum. But I think the important part of, the qualifications behind these individuals, I mean, there's still a little bit left to be discussed on that front. But I like the fact that, not one of them can be tied in any way financially to the industry, sort of as a way to sort of remain objective or as objective as possible. I also like the fact that none of them can be actually politicians. I think that there are a lot of external influences that come into play when you're regulating cannabis markets. And quite honestly, if we lose sight of the fact that everything that we do to regulate this is really for the benefit of the consumer, which is going to, really sort of determine whether or not the market survives, that's really where the focus should be. I mean, if we focus on the end result and we give the consumer what they want, we provide them with a safe product and a way to use the product in a constructive sort of way, in a controlled manner. And that means accurate labels. That means, being able to use these products at a certain dose. If we can do that, then we have a market that really sort of, it's more of a controlled environment, for lack of a better descriptor there. I think that's the important thing. If you look at the way the market is now, there really isn't much of an opportunity for, the guys that are putting in the blood, sweat, and tears and actually cultivating and producing a product, for the consumer. There's no way for them to really sort of brand what it is that they're doing. And as we transition into a recreational space, we go from more of this, hey, it's generic, like cannabis is cannabis, marijuana is marijuana, just, buy it and here's the high potency stuff, into more sort of curated recommendations for not only medicinal patients, but also for the recreational consumer. Look, I mean, I know plenty of people that are recreational consumers and, they go and get a product and they're like, yeah, I'm going to, get a little, I'm going to relax myself before I go out and have a good time. And I'm going to be social at this party. And, it's more of one of these sort of deep, relaxing, sedating type strains. And it's got the opposite effect. And really that is because of the lack of consumer guidance. And I think that as we look at this structure, the structure here of the bill to me seems sound. There are definitely parts of it that are going to be discussed further and modified. I mean, there's a lot of discussion on the social equity piece. I'm going to leave that to the politicians. But my point is that, look, as we move over to a new Cannabis Control Commission and the regulations that are in place for the safety of these products, although we can maybe manipulate some of those thresholds to make them more reasonable, from a health standpoint and to the industry, I think the rules that are in place, broad category wise, are actually very good rules. I think that these regulations, we should try to preserve them because they do ensure the safety of the downstream consumer. So as we move into this rec market, I think it's very important for the Cannabis Control Commission to allow the product developers, the retail front, to market products effectively. And whether that's, being able to brand the packaging and sort of, attract a loyal following of consumers, or it's the retail, face being able to say something about what the anticipated effects of this product are for the consumer based on the lab results, based on what's in it, based on the known science. I think that should be fully acceptable in this market.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think the cultivators probably have a pretty good level of input on this. So there is some discussion, or there's a lot of discussion in this bill, about how you can advertise, where you can advertise, who you can advertise to, et cetera. You can't advertise on billboards, for example. However, Massachusetts is throwing up every billboard that they can to drive business out of Rhode Island and into the state of Massachusetts.
I'm so glad you said that, and not me.
Well, I drive by about 7 of them a day.
Absolutely.
Right?
I was driving to the state
It
house.
astounds me because it astounds me because it is basically suggesting to people, please commit a felony, drive across the border with a substance that is a Schedule I narcotic that you're not supposed to be crossing borders with. But please, by all means, come to Massachusetts and then go home and enjoy it in your house. By the way, you got to cross 2 state borders, right? It's crazy to me. And I'm not saying it's appropriate. I'm actually suggesting that those billboards shouldn't exist right now.
We are, as well as cultivators in Rhode Island. We think that those billboards should not be allowed. And it's negatively impacting all of our businesses as cultivators, as well as the retailers too.
I mean, if you see a billboard like this and the average consumer looks at it and they say to themselves, well, it must be okay. It must be okay for me to drive to a different state with different laws and bring back.
I don't think most of them realize that crossing state lines is a felony.
No, that's what I'm saying. Okay.
I should say it's a felony. It's illegal.
If it's on a billboard, it must be okay to do.
As much as we all like this bill that's on the table, that is one of the things that is advertising is one of the things that's in there that we cultivators or this industry will not be allowed to advertise. But it's okay for out of state to advertise here in Rhode Island.
And I think that's something we should just look at a little bit, because what I didn't see in this bill was regulations about package advertising itself.
So just to interject, so those are part of the regulations that now exist. The Cannabis Control Commission has the authority to change those regulations. And there will actually be a 1-year period where there'll be transitional regulations that get implemented. Now, my point in the last comment was I hope that we preserve the integrity of, the testing standards. And I did note that in the bill, it did say that all cannabis products will be tested. And that's a step up from where we are right now. And look, we all know that the cost of testing, it's another burden for the industry. We know that. But quite honestly, when you've got neighboring recreational markets that are offering fully tested products, and they're labeled and there's information on there about terpene profiles and the stuff that consumers now are starting to sort of learn and gravitate toward. If we're not offering that, we are losing market share.
Oh, there's no question. And then I just to stay on this track here is that in order for a brand to become a consistent product, to gain some traction in the marketplace and to bring in some money to put back into the business, these guys have to be able to advertise their products appropriately. And create a brand awareness around them. That's what separates one business from another. That's what creates the competition. And that's what drives better products. And that's what actually drives, I think, the safety of the market for the most part, and prevents people from cutting corners, is allowing this open market ability to create a product and sort of package it as you will. And you're correct, the packaging today, if you walk into a Rhode Island dispensary, you look around, everything is just white box, yellow warning label, some black words, and that's about it.
Very monochromatic.
Probably got
no way to distinguish.
Best logo out there right now. Okay, but let's face it, it's not a lot. There's not a lot of stuff there.
We follow the regulations, and we understand it, and there needs to be regulations, and we're happy to adhere to them. But branding is important. And they're almost making it like unique to this industry. We are a viable, legitimate business.
Yep.
And we should have the same opportunities as other businesses.
Okay, you can look at a place like Lowell Herbs, okay, which did a fantastic job on their marketing, their packaging in Massachusetts, and is now in Denver and in California.
Yeah.
They've been able to move state to state because they created a brand where their state allowed this sort of stuff to be done. And I think, personally, one of my criticisms of this is that there should be already spelled out the ability for you guys to start creating these brands and these
I bet you most Rhode Islanders know the brand names or the dispensaries from Massachusetts more so than they know any brand or name of a Rhode Island company.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, I mean, it's not just branding and advertising, it's education, right? I mean, the consumer has we have no way of conveying information and education to the end line consumer. And I think a lot of what has happened so far in the state is when cultivators have needs, it gets dealt with sort of in a vacuum. When a lab has needs, it gets dealt with a little bit in a vacuum. All of these different things kind of get dealt with isolated. And then if what we as a cultivator need is different from what the retail side needs, which is different from what the lab needs, there's this real push and pull, and it creates this kind of adversarial relationship between all these parties. What this bill, I mean, again, like was said, we're a long way from exactly what it's going to look like in the end, what these committees are going to look like. What we have a chance for right now is to get all these different parties to work together and be part of a cohesive unit, cohesive market, at which point we can get better information out to the end line consumer, and we can focus more on the consumer, because that is the part that I think has been missing for so long, is being able to, what is best for the patient? What is best for the customer? And how do we best provide that? And I think there's a lot of people who want to provide that information, but we've been extremely limited in our ability to do so. And in the meantime, to your point, we've let Massachusetts come in and take up that space.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I would say too, along the lines of crafting these regulations to sort of allow enough leeway for, cultivators and product manufacturers to brand. I mean, look, we've got a major issue in this industry with THC potency. And right now, that is really the only measure that's being used to assess the quality of marijuana. It's not really looking at the quality of the grow. I mean, look, cultivators they're passionate about what they do. They're always trying to grow the best product. I mean, terpene profiles, the flavor, the aroma, all that stuff matters. In the way the market is set up now, if you're not able to distinguish yourself and the market dictates that THC is the most valuable thing, it's misguiding consumers. I would argue that these high potent THC products are really abandoning some of the medicinal patient population. CBD is gone entirely from these strains that have been bred to just be super potent. And, on the recreational side of things, it's a scary world for someone who has never even tried this stuff before, that says, hey, look, I'm reading a lot about this. I think this may help me. It just makes it harder for these products to apply to more people. And look, we are actually, as Matt said, I mean, look, we need to start thinking outside the box. I mean, we are not competing against one another in this state so much as we're competing with other markets. We are trying to create a market that does it right here in Rhode Island, that offers the consumer what they need and allows them that controlled experience. And information is key. If we're not allowed to provide that, honestly, we're missing the mark.
Support the podcast by heading to patreon.com/BartholomewTown. Do you know what's in your cannabis? Recreational use legalization is on the horizon, and consumer health is Pure Vita Lab's priority. If you use cannabis, choose lab-tested cannabis products over unlabeled black market products, which are likely to contain harmful contaminants. Legal products offer a safe and controlled cannabis experience. Competent testing labs are the gatekeepers to the legal cannabis industry. Pure Vita Labs, founded by physicians and PhD chemists, is rooted in science and built on integrity. They are committed to helping cultivators and product manufacturers deliver clean and accurately labeled cannabis products to consumers. Know what's in your cannabis, know your dose, and control your experience. Visit purevitalabs.com. That's purevitalabs.com. Don't miss the Bartholomew Town Radio Hour every Saturday at 3 p.m. on 99.7 FM and AM 630 WPRO.
Now back to B-Town.
You're getting into a conversation which is, I don't think it's not specifically restricted in this bill, but it's also not really spoken to. And hopefully this is one of the things that we all get together and talk about with the advisory board and come to an understanding. But as Matt pointed out, that, there is no real direction on these products, no direction on the labels. And you got to be careful, right? You can't make claims about products. You can't make a claim that this is now a medicine that will cure a disease state. You can't make a claim that this is a product that will change some, physiologic aspect of who you are. However, there is best science out there. There are plenty of academic articles now. There's enough science for us. We could sit here for an hour and a half and talk about receptor modulation between CBD, THC, all the terpenes.
Oh, please, let's do it.
Actually
the audience will just flip the switch.
But it's important. It's important. And if you really start asking yourself, well, how does this stuff work? Why do I feel differently? Why does someone with rheumatoid arthritis respond to one strain and another strain, makes them a puddle in the corner, quivering with a high heart rate? There are differences in the compounds, and those really matter. And until we can get some education out to the patients, out to just the consumers in general, we call them patients now because all we have is a medical market here. But when we can get information out to those consumers about, hey, look, this is how these terpenes interact with these cannabinoids. And by the way, CBD is probably 10 times more important than THC. And it's the ratio that matters. And by the way,
absolutely.
CBN is going to be very, very important. So the education needs to be there. And on the label, when choosing a product, you've got to be able to convey at least the best science we have right now to help people direct themselves one way or another, at least to know that this combination of terpenes and cannabinoids in this strain is more likely to produce sedation than this ratio of terpenes and cannabinoids, which is more likely to create an energized state. Okay.
To John's point there, so right now the market exists as a trial and error type menagerie, right? You go in there, you pick something out, you try it and either works for you or doesn't. Now, the problem with that, of course, is if you have a bad experience, this drives a lot of consumers will not come back to the market. For example, let's say they try 30% total THC flower and it turns them into a puddle in a corner, as Jonathan would say. The probability of that customer coming back and say, well, this is a good product for me is very low. And that comes back to the point that we're trying to make about education. And that, again, I still think the bill doesn't address it, as you say, directly, but it needs to give us the ability to educate the public.
Yeah. And again, just as a point of clarification, everything we're discussing here about the ability of, product manufacturers to actually brand, this is not specifically spelled out in the bill. This will be under, the jurisdiction of the Cannabis Control Committee.
Nor is it restricted in the bill.
Exactly. There are some, stipulations in there about advertising, as we've discussed. But, the reality is we're bringing this up as a topic, as a very important point of consideration where, as this bill gets modified before it gets passed, we don't want to pigeonhole. We don't want to restrict. If we're going to leave it up to the CCC, that's fine. But let's let the CCC work with the advisory board and hear all perspectives in the industry to make the right choice on this instead of sort of writing it into, this is the edict from the beginning.
Yeah, and I think when consumers look at this industry, look, there's major differences between what I'm about to say and the cannabis industry. But if you think of the craft beer industry, or you go to a farmer's market and, a variety of different products there, obviously, again, major differences. But from a marketing perspective and from a consistency perspective, there's expectations that can be developed when you don't have proper marketing mechanics in cannabis. You are just setting people up for confusion. And so I'm surprised that that's not more directly spelled out in the bill. And I would agree that was something that I kind of had expected. I'm interested from the cultivator standpoint and from the retail standpoint, just working backwards. How difficult is it going to be for all of you to obtain the type of product that is, or I should say, attain the type of product in the case of the cultivators that meets consumers' demands, if that makes any sense? You're really going to set expectations potentially for a consumer and then have to grow that product with those very specific standards, or in a retail sense, be able to present and distribute that product. How difficult is that, and how do you do that?
We don't find it to be challenging at all. We're currently doing it. We're currently producing products that would be very well received in the rec market. We just need a rec market to begin in Rhode Island as quick as possible. There's a date floating around of October 1st to begin rec sales. And we feel as cultivators that's too far out and we need it to happen faster. It needs to be done properly with the proper testing in place to be able to give a quality product to consumers. And we really need transitional regulations in place as soon as possible for all this to happen. And I think DBR needs to be given the authority to promulgate those regulations in order for us to get this rec market started as quickly as possible. Cultivators are ready to deliver.
I don't think anyone will argue. I mean, this bill almost aside, we are so far behind with getting, cannabis recreationalized in Rhode Island. We have lost so much tax revenue, so much business from Rhode Island to Massachusetts, and not just to the dispensaries. But once you're in Massachusetts, why not stay and spend your money at the malls and at the restaurants?
Yes.
And every other business, and buy your gas in Massachusetts and do everything else in Massachusetts while you're at it. Where is the focus on Rhode Island? And it's been too long, and I think there's been, seems to me, too much politics in this to prevent it from occurring for a long time. But to your point, this is something that, we can't sit around and wait for the politicians to take another session entirely to figure this out. There needs to be a transition period and allow the current dispensaries to start going rec immediately. And that's my opinion.
Yeah. And Bill, going back to what you mentioned about how are we going to supply products, how are we going to develop different strains for the patients and consumers? We already have them. I think what it comes down to is that patient and consumer education. They need to have more of that. They need to understand everything that we do, or a lot of what we do, is to put it on the shelf at a dispensary or the upcoming retail shops. Everything we sell has to be tested, as I don't know if everybody knows, but it has to be tested for potency, THC. It has to be tested for microbials, mold, mildew, bacteria, yeast. It has to be tested for heavy metals, pesticides. What we're doing is we're creating a clean, safe product for patients and consumers. And I don't know how many consumers realize all that.
Well, I think what you just spelled out is so important because, especially cultivators are really all in, which obviously everyone around this table is all in for patient safety.
Absolutely.
Right. So everything you've mentioned, all the nasty things that can occur in cannabis, we make sure it's safe.
Or it's unsellable.
Right. Absolutely. However, I think, to build to your question a little bit more, is that where does the market go and how do you drive products that appease or, please, I should say, the consumers out there? And a lot of what we do, besides just regulatory testing for safety, making sure there's no pesticides, heavy metals, microbial contamination, et cetera, is what is the terpene profile of that plant? What are the cannabinoid ratios of that plant? Not just the THC, which is THC and CBD, which are regulated to be on label, but also CBN, CBG, and CBD. What are these other cannabinoids? What are those ratios? And then when you start to get that information and that people keep saying, geez, Hank's Herbs Fuzzy Melon, best product out there. Holy smokes, everybody loves it, 5 stars. Well, what is actually in it? What's the level of myrcene? And what's the level of limonene? And what's the level of pinene? And what is the ratio of CBN to CBD and CBD to THC? And those pieces of information, which come from the analytic chemistry side, which come from the biology side, which come from the science aspect of it, which is obviously what we're interested in, that can allow you to create a product that meets market demands and consumer desires by paying attention to those compounds and their ratios and an ability to educate the consumer that that's actually what they're looking for and educate them that this is a product that contains that, and then make them know and trust that this is a brand which can consistently create the same product over and over again. It's safe for, as far as the as far as testing, it's pesticide-free, contaminant-free, microbial contamination-free, right? And it has these levels of compounds in them. That's really the product people are going after. And I think the more information, labs can provide to the cultivators, the more information the cultivators can use to determine where that market is going.
Sorry, Matt. No, go around.
I think that's exactly it, right? Bill, you asked the question of what is the capacity for us to provide and recreate these products. I think there's absolutely the capacity for that. I think there's a lot of ability and talent within the Rhode Island market to provide these things. What I don't think we've had is the ability for the market itself to decide what it wants, right? To actually create itself, which again goes back to that end line patient, that end line consumer once recreational goes live, to decide what is it that works for me? What is it that I'm looking for? Why is it that this strain worked really well for me and this one didn't, even though maybe the THC level was pretty similar? What part of it am I missing? And it's a huge part, right? Again, it's that education, the terpene profile, the full cannabinoid profile. And it's just giving that end line patient, that end line market, the chance to find that information and search what works best for themselves and make those choices.
Sure. I just want to add to that too. So, I mean, these guys sort of underestimate or understanding what they do here, right? Because actually generating a consistent product there's a lot of technical science that goes involved in that, right? It's like the genetics is literally only 30 to 40, maybe 50% of the story. The nutrition, the lighting, the spacing of the plants, all of this is part of that process. And that's the skill that's actually in the marketplace right now. So if you're saying, yes, I take a particular product on day A, is it going to be the same on 2 weeks down the line? Yeah, right. Yes, we can do that. And it literally comes, even just turning the lights on at different times can change things like the terpene profiles, for example, in the growth cycle. So there's a whole lot of science that's already in the marketplace that these the cultivators have got. And that is the key to making a consistent product. It's actually understanding the science behind how the flower grows, how it develops the cannabinoids. At what point do I increase the intensity of my labs to make a different terpene profile? All these sort of things, and it's already there in the marketplace. It's already there with the cultivators, and they do a great job at doing that for sure.
And let's say it is in the marketplace. It's in the national marketplace. There's one place like Leafly, and I don't know how many people who are listening to this are going to be familiar with this, but this is a data aggregator, right? That takes information from all over the country, all over the world, and allows people to discuss and rate certain strains of cannabis on them. And people are looking for certain aspects of a strain. They go to Leafly. The problem with Leafly or a platform like Leafly is extraordinarily dirty data that goes into it, right? So garbage in, garbage out. When you have somebody who, bought something off of the street or bought something on the West Coast or bought something in Canada and it all has the same name, doesn't mean a darn thing. Because again, not to get too much into the science, you love to do it, but the name doesn't actually mean exactly what the genotype is, which doesn't necessarily mean what the phenotype is, which certainly doesn't actually mean what the chemotype is, which is ultimately what people are consuming. And so some platform where a consumer can go and actually get clean data, clean information, can really drive them to certain products and really allow a brand to stand out, especially when it comes to consistency.
Yeah, I would just echo all of this. The current market does not allow talented cultivators to showcase their skills. We are really just putting all the emphasis on THC potency. That is in no way, shape, or form how cannabis should be valued. And there are other ways to establish quality product and pricing. And really, consumer demand is going to dictate that. It's going to dictate the pricing in the market. It's going to take some time, but that's the way this is going to go. We have to allow cultivators, though, to showcase their skills. I mean, that's how you compete as a brand. And again, it's not just within, the walls of this state. It's offering products that better cater to the global cannabis industry. Because look, I mean, this train is moving fast. I mean, if we become federally legal at some point, this is no longer just a local competition. I mean, this is like, how good are you, and what are the chances that you're going to be able to compete on a national scale with a brand, with a following? So one other point, getting back to the bill, I do love the fact that there is a clause in there that, there are annual reporting standards where the committee needs to meet and assess how the markets are balanced in terms of how they're meeting consumer needs, like the recreational market and its impact on the medicinal market, for example. I mean, in order to keep tabs on that and to keep tabs on how well we're addressing consumer needs, there needs to be a platform in place that we're able to, kind of gauge the impact of these products on consumers.
So I read that line and in the bill, and it struck me. And I think you got half of it right, but there's this requirement for the board to look at not only the impact, but to make sure that there are enough medicinal products, and they use the word medicinal products, out on the shelves for the medicinal patients. And, as a physician, I've always been struck. This is one of the reasons that I got interested in the analytic chemistry of cannabis is, what does that mean, a medicinal product? What does that actually mean? Because from everything I've been able to research, from every article I've ever read, tells me that the cannabinoids that are really therapeutic for certain disease states are probably not what's being pushed out onto the dispensary shelves, which with this high THC focus. And so a medicinal product, in my mind, is potentially one that has no THC in it. It's one that has the best science behind what the right cannabinoids are, what the right terpenes are, and what the right sort of, physiologic biosignaling pathway exerts some effect on a disease state, not how saturated can we get your CB1 receptors with THC and, make you just whether it's happy, scared, high, however you want to call it, whatever it is, whatever experience that is. But THC alone is a pretty dangerous and unbridled animal. And so the medicinal products, I think, need to be sort of, it's a deeper conversation, right? What is a medicinal product versus a recreational product? And I think the conversation gets so muddy that it's almost, to me, it's not even worth having those distinctions anymore, because what is medicinal to one individual may be mental poison to another. And what is really scary to one person is going to be really helpful for somebody else's IBS or their rheumatism.
Yeah. I mean, if all of the medicinal benefit from cannabis truly came from THC, then you would see flower disappear from the market, and it would just be various dosages of THC capsules, right? But that's obviously not what's happened. That's obviously not what is happening. And that's not to say that there is no value in THC, right? Like that's not my point. And it's tough. We joked earlier that, we could spend quite some time in getting into the go through every terpene one by one, every cannabinoid, and discuss the effects. It can be overwhelming. It can be confusing. But I do think we have to do, like to your point, we have to do a better job of being able to get this information out there and talk about it a little more openly and educate people on what these different combinations can do for someone.
Yeah. And to add to that too, I mean, there's not been a lot of research based on this because it's been restricted in the industry for such a long time, right? So this is like a growing field, and this is part of the reason that Pure Vita Labs exists, is for sure, is that we actually do want to get a better understanding of all the cannabinoid terpenes, the entourage effects, and actually give a better experience to both recreational and medicinal users, right? So everyone can literally get the product that they need.
And the science is moving forward quickly. Go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, and crafting that experience for medical, recreational consumers, and just in general for everyone, even those, these people that are, and I say that in a somewhat disrespectful tone, but folks who are still unwilling to recognize the cannabis industry as either an industry that is broad, growing, and in some cases essential, but also folks who are unwilling to recognize the medicinal and you could even argue spiritual benefit that this industry provides to people, giving them more facts and more comfort in that this isn't just a miscellaneous industry. It is a highly skilled, highly crafted, and intentional industry that needs more opportunity to become even more acute in its nature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And I think that sort of leads you into this idea where consumers absolutely need some method of determining what these products are going to do to them. What is the general direction that you can lead them in? And there are some people out there that will say, I never touch gin, I never touch rum, I never touch tequila wine, because those types of liquors do something to me that I don't enjoy. But a couple light beers and it's great. I'm relaxed, I'm happy. And they may not realize it, but there's compounds in those products that come from the plants. A lot of them are terpenes that change the way their brain chemistry works. And we're not talking about a food product here where we're just buying this stuff because we need calories, we need to fuel ourselves, we need to eat. This is a product that people are purchasing and consuming because it has some effect on them. And to better understand that effect, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So I envision a future where somebody opens up their phone at the dispensary, scans a few products, puts in a list of their medications, because by the way, a lot of medications inhibit the same enzymes that metabolize cannabinoids. So, and I'm not going to give anybody any ideas out there about which ones you can take, which will increase the bioavailability in the serum plasma concentration of THC, but they exist. There are drug-drug interactions. So put your list of medications in, tell us what sort of experiences you've had in the past, which will at least give us some idea of what your own sort of genetic metabolism pathway will be for these compounds. And let's sort of push you in one direction or another to figure out what product is going to be best for you, whether it's a disease state or whether it's a recreational sort of mood that you're looking for.
So I don't want to, totally redirect the conversation, but there is one thing that I'm kind of curious about now that, we have you guys at the table as cultivators. We talked about this bill really outlines a way in which these sort of additional licenses are going to be, allocated in the future. I mean, right now we've got the 6 new retail licenses, and that's going to give us a total of 9 places where people can go to buy cannabis. The existing compassion centers have the ability to pay a fee of $125,000 to start also selling recreational use cannabis at their facilities once it's allowable in the state. Now, there's a 2-year moratorium that is placed on adding any additional licenses after those 9 that have already been allocated. We're working on a zone system here in the state, and the bill actually says that there's a plan to implement another 24 retail stores with a maximum of 4 per geographic zone. There are social equity requirements that are involved, but what do you guys feel about license restrictions and the number? I mean, do you agree with the number that's set here? Do you think it should be stricter? Do you think, look, we all know that you're not handed a golden egg in the cannabis industry by obtaining a license. There's a lot to running a business, and you see a lot of businesses fail because there is too much competition in an immature market. I just want to hear your perspectives on that.
I concur with what you say. I mean, we do not want to overflood the market too soon, too quickly. Easing into anything is probably the best approach to take. Education, the science behind it, so consumers are aware and educated as to what they should be purchasing. Not everybody wants the same effect week in and week out. They have different needs, different wants. I'm happy to hear that the 3 centers should be up and running come October 1st. We hope it's sooner because, as was mentioned earlier, we are losing a good market share to Massachusetts, and it's difficult on not only the cultivators, but also the compassion centers and the patients. The patients are being inconvenienced. They're running over state lines to buy cannabis without the burden of purchasing a medical card.
Incredibly overpriced cannabis at that.
Yes.
And again, that brings in the taxation issue. I mean, look, it's a total of 20% that's proposed on Rhode Island products.
And the numbers, I'm not an expert on the numbers of how they came up with these, 24 retail shops, but it's really no different than the liquor industry. They're liquor licenses. There should also be cannabis licenses.
Yeah, I mean, they are. And again, I mean, this market anyone on the wholesale cultivation side knows that there has been a certain pinch, over the last, number of years that we've been in operation. There are very few outlets to get your product to. And, again, in sort of increasing the number of retail licenses, it does allow cultivators to get more product out there. But I do think that there is going to be a limit to what the state can tolerate, so that the people that have actually, put in all the blood, sweat, and tears and really worked hard to give the consumer what they want, you're not really going to sort of go under because there's not enough to sort of spread around. You know what I mean? And I think that that's an important consideration. I actually like the 2-year moratorium. I think we're going to need time to assess the market and see if we're meeting the needs of the consumers. So I think that that's a great clause to have in there.
Right, because what
and
we
then go from
have
there.
right now, for the last 5 years, while this industry has been medical, or cultivators have been involved with the medical market, I should say, it really isn't a good barometer as to what could have been, because there's only been 3 centers to sell to. So that's 3 centers for consumers or patients only to purchase from.
So there's not good geographical distribution for the patients to have the access to the medicine. They're inconvenient locations for maybe 70% of the state. So we haven't really seen what the patient market could be like. And as far as the moratorium goes, I believe that 2-year moratorium is only for cultivators and not for the additional retailers. As far as cultivators go, we want it to be more like 3 years, because we have all made a significant investment, hundreds of thousands of dollars, some of us millions of dollars, and we haven't even begun to recuperate our initial investment. And we're currently, most of us are operating every year as a loss or barely break even. And investors, that doesn't help the people that took the risk as investors that supported us.
I think that's hugely important what you just touched on, because, just like we're talking about losing business to Massachusetts, let's face it, we're all Rhode Islanders.
Yes.
We live here, we work here. We have, we want Rhode Island to be the best that it can be.
Absolutely.
And so when we talk about creating a new industry and a new business in Rhode Island, we want it to benefit Rhode Islanders and benefit our roads and our streets and our schools and our children. And when, if this all of a sudden opens up to a recreational market in one of the highest per capita use cannabis regions in the country, imagine who's coming in tomorrow. And the people who have stuck it out through this entire period, who have taken losses, who have barely broken even, many of them, who have, put their lives entirely into this business, to all of a sudden be wiped out by somebody coming in here with $40 million to create a state-of-the-art facility. Don't get me wrong, we want state-of-the-art facilities, but we don't want to abandon or have the folks that have stuck it out and spent their time and their money and their hard work creating a business in Rhode Island already under these difficult sort of regulations that exist right now to be wiped out. And I think that moratorium is really important to maintain the folks who live here and operate here, to give them a chance to get into this new recreational market. Because there are bigger players out there that will come in, just like Walmart will wipe out a mom and pop hardware store. And we don't want to see that. I don't think anybody is interested in having that here.
Protecting the hyper-local small business aspect of this is critical, no doubt about it.
Rhode Island's podcast of record, B-Town.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.